Okay, so for anyone that wasn't here last week, I'll just pop this up on the screen. My name is Catriona and I am a portrait photographer based in near Dungannon in County Tyrone. So you can pause this when you go back and watch the video if you want to give me a follow on Instagram or Facebook. And also the photography training part of my business, which is the Photo Academy NI. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram as well. And there are QR codes which you can scan, which will take you straight to the pages. And just very quickly, I mentioned this last week as well, but I run a free 52-week photography challenge. So if you're interested, that's the link to join. And it's great crack. And we do different topics every week. And you can read more about it and sign up on that link below. So let's get started. We talk about editing your smartphone portraits. So I'm sure most of us, to some degree, we've taken a photograph and we think we might want to make some adjustments to it, to our portraits. You can make some basic edits in the Photos app on your phone or in the Gallery app, depending if you're iPhone or Android. The one thing I'd say about editing is that I always say do it in stages. Just don't go 100% at everything. Take your time, do it gradually, and don't overdo it. Do it in moderation. That would be my and this is with regards to all editing, all photographs, not just portraits. Just gently, you can apply a bit of the adjustments that I'm going to show you today and then gradually build it up. But most importantly, editing is not going to transform a photograph that you've taken that doesn't look good. Okay, so the main thing is to try and get it right in camera, and then editing subtly enhances it and adjusts it in some way. So we talked about this last week, but light is really important when you're taking portraits. So you've taken your photograph, editing then can transform it from ordinary to something that looks a bit more special. So one of the handiest apps that I use, and this is the one we're going to look at in this lesson, is called Snapseed. It's Snapseed. It's a free app. You don't have to pay to use any of the functions in it, which is why I like recommending it. So we'll talk about it in a wee second and a number of the different adjustments that you can make. But I just wanted to very quickly start off by saying, let's look at some basic editing that you can do just in the Photos app or the Gallery app on your phone, depending if you're iPhone or Android. So on iPhones, then first of all, when you go into your Photos app, now depending on which version of the iOS software that you have, which is Apple's operating system, if you have anything that's before iOS 18, your Photos app will look like this. And I wish they had left it alone because it was very straightforward and easy to use. But I'll show you in a wee second what the new system looks like because I upgraded to it. So in the old version, you would press edit and then it would bring you up your photograph with a number of adjustments, which we'll look at in a wee second that you can make. On the newer version, this is what your screen looks like now when you go into your photo app, and I found it very confusing at the start when I went in. I couldn't see where edit was. So it's down at the bottom of the screen on these little slider options. So if you tap there, it brings you through to the same screen like this. And then you can go in and make a number of adjustments, which we'll look at in a second, or you can crop your image as well. On Android phones, it varies slightly, but most of them have these type of options here. So you'll have your crop tool, some filters, you can do like emojis, etc. But this is the one here, which looks like a circle with wee dots around it, and that's your adjustment editing suite within Samsung. Google have Edit if you have a Google Pixel phone, and you can go in and make a number of adjustments there. And then on Oppo phones, they tend to have Adjust as well. So these are they tend to be the same type of adjustments that you can make on both iPhones or Android phones. So you can adjust. You'll normally have like an auto adjustment, which is where it will make an adjustment to the entire image. So it doesn't apply it to certain parts of it. It's just a blank sort of adjustment to the entire image, and you can adjust brightness, contrast, etc. I'm not going to go into these an awful lot, but what I've done here is I've broken these down on the screen. So remember, this adjustment is to the entire photograph, not to part of it. So feel free whenever this goes back, you can go and have a read of what these do on the different phones, and the number of options that you can do will vary between the make of your phone. So you have your lighting adjustments. So that means you can make your image brighter or darker. You can adjust the highlights, which are the brightest parts, and the shadows. You can make it more contrasty. Then you have color adjustments, which adjust the color, and that means you can make the colors more richer, or you can convert your image to black and white. You can make it warmer or cooler toned, or you can adjust the tint, which is how green or magenta the photograph looks. And then you have your detail adjustments, and they tend to adjust how sharp it is. You can make the edges darker, which is a vignette, or adjust the noise reduction. And noise is where you take a photograph when it's in lower light conditions, and basically the camera or the smartphone in this case adds in like wee dots or grain on your photograph, and then you can help remove that using the noise reduction option. So that's just a very quick overview of generally making adjustments, but we're going to look more specifically at portraits today and using the Snapseed app. So that's the logo there that you will see if you download it. Now, when you open up Snapseed for the first time, it can be a wee bit daunting, but honestly, it's pretty straightforward. And the best way with everything is to practice and just experiment. So you'll see a screen like this when you go into Snapseed initially. And all you need to do is just tap anywhere on the screen, and then it will bring you up a menu like this. And this will be from your camera roll here. So the one that I tend to use when you come to the screen is open from device. And when you tap on here, then it brings you into your gallery on your phone or your phone app or your Photos app, sorry, and you can pick the photograph that you want to work with. You can also take a photograph within the Snapseed app or open up your last image. So when you go and do that, you've opened up your photograph, it defaults to the photograph shown in the middle of the screen, and then you have 3 options along the bottom. Now, depending if you are iPhone or Android, this will look slightly different. In iPhones, it says looks. In Android phones, it says styles in the bottom left-hand corner. Then you have tools and you have export. So tools are, think of them like a preset in terms of it makes a number of adjustments very quickly to your photograph. So your photograph is open. You can tap on any of these thumbnails along the bottom of the screen. You tap on it on the screen and it performs a number of adjustments. And if that's all you want to do, that's fine. So you can change it to black and white. And this is called faded glow. So just tap on those and see which works best for you. And if that's all you want to do, you can simply press the tick icon at the bottom of the screen, and that will apply those adjustments. And that's all you need to do. If you don't like the adjustment, you can press the X button, and then it takes you back to the original image. So that's the first screen here, which you have looks or styles. The next option then is tools, and tools are like a pop-up menu that appears, and you can scroll up or down on the screen to choose between the different tools. Now, there are 28 different tools in there. I'm not going to go through them all, but I'm going to explore the ones that are most useful for portrait editing. So you've opened your photograph, you tap on tools, and then it brings you this menu, which you scroll up or down on the screen and pick whichever one that you want to work in. Just very quickly, I'll show you at the top of the screen here, you'll see these options, and the one that says 3 dots. If you tap on it, it brings up a further menu which has some tutorials in there that Snapseed have what do you say, pre-recorded to the app itself, so you can go in and watch those. You also have an option which for help and feedback, and then there are settings, which I'm not going to go into today, but you can go in and fine-tune your settings within the app. And then if you want to see information about the image itself, press the eye icon at the top of the screen, and it tells you information about the photo that you've taken that you're working on. So let me see. Oh yeah, so generally when you're in Snapseed, if you open a photograph, you go into any of the tools. Say you go to the tune image, which is the first one we're going to look at. If you want to make any adjustment, you simply move your finger. Actually, it's hard to do this, but you move your finger to the right, or to the left in the screen. So to the right, if you move it from left to right, adds increases the adjustment, or if you move it from the right to the left, it reduces the adjustment. Very straightforward. So just remember that if you want to increase the adjustment, move it from left to right, and move it from right to left. I'm going to show you this bit now because sometimes we're a bit tight for time. So I want to make sure that you know how to save your image, and then you can go, we'll show you how to make the adjustments in a wee second. So once you have, if I go back here, You can see at the bottom you have your looks or styles tools, and then you have export. And export basically means you've finished making all your adjustments and you want to save it. So once you've decided you've done all your adjustments, if you press export, this menu will pop up, and it varies again slightly between iPhone and Android. So you normally have share, which is where it allows you to share the image to different apps or to other people. You have open in, which allows you to open your image in a different app. The ones that I tend to use would be these ones at the bottom, which would be save or save a copy or export. So on Android phones, when you press save, it saves a copy of your image to your gallery. Save on iPhone saves over your original image in your gallery. So I don't tend to use save because I take my photographs on an iPhone. I would use save a copy, but on Android phones, save just saves a copy of your image. Then you have export. So on iPhones, export means it creates a copy with permanent changes to your photograph. Export in Android saves a copy of your photograph, which you can read what it says there. So it's useful if you want to resize your images to share on, say, the likes of Etsy or somewhere if you're sharing your photographs online. And then export as on Androids creates a copy. I'm just going to minimize this down here so I can see my writing. It creates a copy to a selected folder. And then on Android phones, there is not the option to save the edits, which are called stacks. On Android phones at present. So it means if you save a photograph in Snapseed, you're not able to go back and adjust it. Where on iPhones, you've saved it on your camera roll, you can go back into Snapseed again and it will have basically saved all the steps that you've done. So on Android phones, that's not currently an option. The one thing I'll just mention as well about when you, if you have saved a photograph to you export it and it saves it to your phone, it may save it to the end of your camera roll, or say you opened a photograph from 3 months ago, then it might save a copy of it beside the original photo. So if you can't find it at the end of your camera roll, don't be afraid to go back. And once you have used Snapseed for the first time and you export one image from Snapseed into your phone, it should create an album in your phone as well, which means you can quickly find your Snapseed photographs in there. And the last thing before we get stuck in is just say you're working on a photograph and you've made a number of adjustments, but you decide, you know what, I don't want to work in this photograph anymore, then you can open a separate photograph. So if you press open in the top left-hand corner of the screen, it'll prompt you and say all unsaved changes applied will be lost. So if you want to go ahead and just work on a new photograph, press open. If you had forgot to save and export your photograph, just press cancel and it'll take you back to the photo, then press export. So we get stuck in now, just keeping an eye on time here, for tools. So tools, these are the number of different tools that you can go in. You've opened your photograph, you go to tools, excuse me, sorry, second. Voice is very dry today. And then you can pick whichever tool you want to work on. So we're going to go for Tune Image first of all. And Tune Image allows you to make a number of adjustments within this tool. You open your photograph, go to Tune Image, and then if you tap on these slider icons here, it brings you up a number of adjustments that you can make. So simply tap on any one of those that you want to adjust, and then move your finger to the right to increase that adjustment, or to the left on the screen to reduce it. So we'll have a wee look at these, what they do now. So brightness, strangely enough, makes your photograph brighter or darker. Contrast makes it more punchy, so more contrast or not. Saturation increases the color intensity. Sorry, my voice is going today. Excuse me. Ambiance adds a glow to the edges of a subject, and highlights adjust the brightest parts, shadows adjust the darkest parts, and then warmth makes it warmer or cooler tone. So I'm going to show you some examples now so you can see what I mean. And know that if you look at the top of the screen within any of these, once you press the slider option, you pick, say, brightness, at the top of the screen it says 0 beside it, and that means that you haven't made any adjustment. Once you start to move the increase or decrease that particular adjustment, you'll see this number beside the brightness option will change. So it'll go up or down, the number. And then once you're finished making any of the adjustments, I'll show you what examples in a wee second of what they are. But once you're finished making your adjustments, you can press the tick icon, and then that finishes within that particular tool. and then you can move on and use a different tool. Say you've went into a tool and you think, right, I've made some adjustments, I don't like it, I want to come back out, press the X icon, take you back out to the original photo. That's your slider option. And then this is your auto adjust. So when you tap on that, the smartphone app will make a number of adjustments, how it thinks it should look. But to be perfectly honest, I never really use the auto adjust. I tend to do it myself. So these are the different options. So this one is brightness. So in these, I have just sort of picked -50 and +50 to show you the difference. So this is the original. You can see how it's made it darker or brighter. This is contrast. So that's -50 contrast and +50. This one is your saturation. So saturation, I would say be very careful of it because you can see how the colors look artificial. So I would never tend to be up more than 10 or 20 at absolute most. For portraits, I wouldn't even tend to go up as much as 20 because I think it starts to look, you can see the color, the skin tone is not particularly good. So you're really not going to be up anything more than around 20. If you reduce the saturation, this is how you can also change your image to black and white. So if you move it the whole way to the left of the screen, then that means you're removing all of the color, which is desaturation, and that's a quick way of moving or converting it to black and white. Or you can just make it a wee bit more muted. So that's the saturation option. This is ambience. It's quite a subtle adjustment. I don't tend to use this one an awful lot, to be honest, but just you can see hopefully the difference between the original and the plus and -50. This is your highlights, and highlights is one that I would use quite a bit, probably more so for landscapes, but in portraits you can use it where if, say in this example here, a person's wearing a white top and it looks quite over bright compared to the rest of the image, you could decrease your highlights, move them down a wee bit, and you can see how it's brought some more detail back into that. But be careful of it because it starts to look a bit funky if you do too much reduction on the highlights. And then if you want to increase and lift the brightest part of the image, then you could increase your highlights up. Shadows is the opposite. So shadows is you're working on the darkest parts of your image, and then you can either intensify those or lift the shadows to make it a bit brighter. And then warmth is where you can make your image warmer or cooler toned. And again, be careful of this for portraits because you can see how it looks a bit weird. So that's just one to keep an eye on. So that's tune image. It's one that I use a lot for all of my images where I can make those adjustments. I tend to use the highlights quite a bit or brightness and contrast. We're now going to move on to white balance, and you might think, what an under goodness is that? So white balance is where you can adjust the color to make it warmer or cooler toned. In cameras, there is a white balance setting. So this is what it's trying to replicate within the Snapseed app. So maybe you take a photograph and you're taking a photograph indoors where you might have an overhead light bulb on, or you might be beside a fire, or in the wintertime, this time of year, it can look a wee bit cooler toned outside and you want to make it warmer. Well, you can use the white balance tool to do that. So when you go into white balance, you have your three options along the bottom. You have the AW, which stands for auto white balance, and that's where the app decides how warm or cool toned the photograph should be. You have your slider option again, which brings up this pop-up menu, which has temperature or tint. So say you wanted to make it warmer, you would go to white balance, tap on your slider option here, then tap on temperature. And then if you move your finger to the right on the screen, it makes it warmer. To the left, it makes it cooler. I'm not going to mention or go into the tint one now because it's not something that's used very often and not really for portraits. So we'll leave that one for now. One of the other really cool features in the white balance is this eyedropper tool or color picker tool. And that's when you tap on it, it will, sorry, back that in a second. It brings you up this color picker. So the important part of it is that you place the wee red cross in the center of that over something which is like a neutral color in the photograph. And then in theory, this should give you the correct color temperature of your photo. So in these examples, I have moved it. So you can see when I place it over something which is quite a neutral color, it does a pretty good job. If I placed it over here, which is the person's legs, then it has turned it a really weird color. And then if I place it here on this lighter part, which is slightly blue, it has adjusted it. So you can use the color picker tool to get your white balance correct. And that's just showing you there, if you use the slider options, how you can adjust the temperature to make it warmer or cooler toned. So you can see again, a plus number means it's intensifying that adjustment. A minus number over here is decreasing it. The brush tool then, so up until now, we've talked about adjustments which you can make to the entire image. And the brush tool allows you to make adjustments to part of your photograph, and it allows you to adjust 4 things. So you go into brush, then it brings you up this menu here, and you have dodge and burn, exposure, temperature, and saturation. So we've looked at saturation already, which is where you're making your colors more rich or more muted. Temperature makes it warmer or cooler. Exposure makes it brighter or darker. And then there's one which you're probably thinking, what is dodge and burn? So dodge and burn makes it brighter or darker. And this, it harks back to the days of using a darkroom, where you used a technique in the darkroom where you used your hands or a bit of paper to try and make part of your images brighter or darker. And that's where the terminology dodge and burn comes from. So say, for example, you pick dodge and burn, and then at the bottom here, you'll see it'll say the brush option that you're working on. It'll have 2 arrows up or down, and it has a number in the center. It'll tend to default to the highest plus number. So in this case, it'll say +10. So if you then want to brighten a part of your image, then you would use a positive number. If you wanted to darken a part of your image, you would use a negative number. And you literally just paint on the area on the screen that you want to adjust, and then it'll make it brighter or darker. Now you can use the arrows which appear beside the number to change the option. So it'll have +10, +5, and then it goes to the middle option which says eraser, which I'll talk about in a wee second, and then it'll have -5 and -10. And I'll show you now where you can literally paint on. Now basically her face is not red, but this is an option here, the wee eye icon, which is like a mask which shows you which part of the image that you're working on, and then you can tap it on or off just to see if you're not sure where you've made the adjustment. And then you can paint on where you want to adjust, and then it'll show you where you're working on. So say you've made an adjustment to the photograph and you think, actually, I don't like that what I've done. I want to remove that brush adjustment. If you use the arrows to go back to eraser, make sure it says eraser in the center, and then just paint over that same area, and it'll remove the adjustment that you've just made. So this is the brush tool here. I'm not saying that this is necessarily the, I'm just gonna move that down a wee bit, the best way to do it, but I wanted to show you exactly what it does. So the brush tool, using dodge and burn, I painted over this girl's face. This is the original photograph. That's after you have adjusted it. So you can see how you can brighten a specific area of the image using the brush tool. The same applies to the other adjustments. So you have exposure, which also brightens and darkens the image. You have, I think, 3 options for exposure. You have +3, +5, +10. So it gives you a few more different options in there to make it brighter or darker. As I said, temperature makes it warmer or cooler, and then saturation increases the color intensity. Yeah, that's just the color temperature. And you can see now, I'm not telling you to do this to the person's face, but I just wanted to show you how you could adjust the temperature to a specific part of the photograph. Black and white then. Black and white is something I would use a lot for my landscape shots and sometimes for portraiture, but it's totally up to you if you like black and white or color photographs. So sorry, I'm all over fluster now. So you go in and pick one of your tools here, which is black and white, and then you go into it and it'll bring you up a bit like the presets at the start where you have your looks or styles. You have preset black and white options. So you can tap on any of the thumbnails along the bottom here and pick whichever one that you want. So hopefully you can see the difference between these black and white. So a neutral is a more just neutral sort of black and white. Contrast, you can see the difference between the two. A darker option can work for certain photos. So it's just a matter of tapping through these and seeing which works best for your particular subject. And then this one is dark and sky. So out of all of these, I probably prefer this one the best. Now, I know it says dark and sky, so it's more so for landscapes, but it worked particularly well, I think, in this shot here. So you can just tap on any of these, press the tick icon, and then you're finished. Or you can go in and make further adjustments using the slider option, or you can go into this option here and apply filters. So when you press the slider option, then you have brightness, contrast, or grain. And brightness makes it brighter or darker. Contrast, same as before, it makes the darker parts darker and the brighter parts brighter. And then grain adds little dots which look like specks to your photographs. And some people like to include that effect for, include that tool for creative effect. So it harks back to like using film in cameras. So it's totally up to you if you like that effect or not. So once you go in, you can tap on any of these, and then again slide your finger on the right to the right on the screen to enhance that, or to the left to reduce that effect. And that's just shows you an example there of the original photograph where you have it reduced the contrast down to -50 and increased it up to +50, so you can see the difference it makes to your photo. And then now this is where sometimes this can work for portraits. It works well more so for landscapes, but I just wanted to show you how you can, in case you're wondering what this is, there's a filter option, so you can go in and apply different filters to your image, and you can see the difference that it makes. I've included this option here where you can see what they do. You can pause the video when you're watching back to get a proper read of that. But these are some examples here of how it changes your photo. So by the way, you can see you're not probably going to use some of these to look really funky. So it's been it's not something you're going to use an awful lot probably in portraiture, but that's what it does. Lens blur. So last week we talked about using the portrait mode on your smartphone. But say your phone doesn't have portrait mode on it and you want it to blur the background, or say you've taken a photograph in portrait mode and the portrait mode hasn't kicked in and it hasn't blurred the background, you can achieve the same type of effect using this tool, which is called lens blur. So lens blur, when you tap into lens blur, it brings you this by default, which is the elliptical, which means circular type of focus. So, and then you have linear, which I'll show you an example in a wee second, which is more like either vertical or horizontal line. And what that does is it keeps where you have the blue circle. So you can tap and move the blue circle around the screen and place the blue circle on the thing that you want to have in focus. And then you have an inner circle and you have an outer circle, or two lines on the screen. And then you can pinch on the screen with your fingers like this, that way, to make it out or in, to change the shape and the size of your circle or the lines. And then that allows you to be make the adjustment to a very precise area in the photograph or to a larger area. Then again, you have, so if you tap on this icon here, it taps between the elliptical, circular, or the linear straight lines. You have your slider options here, which allows you to make some further adjustments. And then these are where you can make, I never use this to be honest, but it's like you can apply the blur in a shape like a star, etc. And then press your tick icon when you're finished. So this is the circular one, which is the elliptical one, or you have the straight one, which is straight lines. And yes, so the menu that pops up, you can adjust the intensity of the blur, you can adjust the transition, which is how quickly it goes between in focus and blurred. And then vignette is where it darkens the edges of the photograph, so you can make it more obvious or not. And then when you're happy, press the tick icon. So this is the transition. If you pinch your fingers on the screen to move the lines very close together, then this area will be in focus, this will be partially in focus, and then this will be out of focus. If you move the lines further apart, then it does it more gradually. And then you can adjust the intensity of the blur as well to make it more or less blurred. And that's just to show you there. It's a subtle adjustment, or you can make it more obvious, but again, just everything subtly, in my opinion, when you're coming to editing. So portrait, then this is where, sorry, we're going to probably run over time, my apologies, because so portrait then is where you can make adjustments to like skin smoothing, eye clarity, and the face spotlight, where you can make the face really stand out in a photo. So you go to the portrait tool, and then you have a number of different options along the bottom. So you have this option here, which is slider option. And in there, you can adjust the eye clarity, which makes the eye sparkle. You can adjust skin smoothing, which makes the skin smoother, or you can darken the outside of the photograph and brighten the face using the face spotlight. If you tap on this icon, this allows you to adjust or apply presets. So the one that I normally tend to use if I'm using this, because it's a more subtle version, is called Combo 1. So you tap on this icon and then you can tap on any of these wee thumbnails, but Combo 1 is the one that I recommend. It just makes a subtle adjustment, a wee tiny bit of skin smoothing, a bit of sparkle to the eyes, and it darkens the edges of the photograph a bit and brightens the face. You can adjust the skin tone then by tapping on the face icon. I never use this, to be honest, because I find it quite artificial looking, so I don't tend to use that very much. The skin smoothing. So this is, again, be mindful of the intensity. So if you use it at 100%, you can see it doesn't look like skin. And that's why I always say if you're editing a photograph, skin should have texture, because our skin does have texture. If you remove all the texture, it doesn't look real, but it's totally up to you. If you like that look, go for it. But that's the skin smoothing. I normally recommend about 20 or 30, and max plus 30 or 20. The eye clarity then, same thing applies. If you do it at 100%, it looks like crazy eyes, so we don't want that. And then face spotlight, you don't want it too bright. So normally around 20 to 30 is a good adjustment. And you can see here, using the combo one, it just makes a nice subtle adjustment to your photo. Two more things to show you. I hope you can hold on. Sorry, this is going to run over slightly. The healing tool then is where you can make adjustments to your photograph to remove like a wee blemish. So say you had a spot on your cheek, or me like my cold sore today, you can try and remove that using the healing tool. So with the healing tool, it's where you can, that's a bad example. I just want to show you that when it doesn't work. But so the healing tool here, you can see this wee tiny speck. Say, pretend that was a cold sore in the lip. You go into healing tool, and then you literally just paint on the screen, and you can pinch on the screen to zoom it in. You can see here we're working on quite a precise area in the photograph. And then you just either you can tap on it, or you can move your finger gently over the thing that you want to remove. And what it does is it samples from around the area here and replaces this part with where you basically tell it to remove or to sample it from. So you can see it's done a pretty good job. It'll work well for things like that, or say you had a spot on your cheek. However, if there's a lot of texture in a photograph or around the hairline, anything that has a pattern, it's not going to work particularly well. So you can see here, this is an example I showed you, because there's a lot of texture and pattern that it didn't work well. I've done some examples here just to show you. This was just if you did try to remove a wee line, say, we have these lines here, paint over it, just paint on the screen, and then it's done a good job on that particular option as well. So that's your healing tool. And then the head pose, this one, now it's not something you're going to use all the time, but it has its it has its uses. So you can adjust the pupil size. So say most of us maybe have eyes which are not terribly symmetrical. So say you wanted to change the size of an eye or the pupil size, you can do that. You can make somebody smile in a photograph. But the one that's more important, I would say, in this is around you can adjust the tilt in someone's head, which I'll show you, and also the focal length, depending on which lens that you used on your smartphone to take a photograph. So the pupil size, then you go to this, and the pupil size adjusts the size of the person's eyes. And you can, again, use this with care, because you don't want it to look crazy, because if you make it too big, then it looks like maybe a cartoon character. So use it with subtlety. To adjust the person's mouth or increase their smile, or to reduce it, you simply swipe left or right on the screen to make this adjustment. And again, use it with care, because it can look weird. So it's not one. But this is the head pose, where you can say you've taken a photograph, and I think I touched on this last week, where you have your different lens choices. If you tap on the 0.5, which is the wide angle, and you take a photograph and really close to someone, it can distort their face, your facial features. So you can then correct it using this adjustment within the head pose tool. So say this, an example I took on purpose using the wide angle lens where I was in close to someone. If you adjust it to correct the distortion, you can see how it's evened it out. Whereas if you did it to increase it, it would make it even worse. So that's where you can use the focal length adjustment to correct photographs that you've taken. Oh yeah, sorry, the more thing, but that's just to show you can make a very subtle adjustment to parts of your image. And the very, very last thing, this is more just for a creative type effect to your photograph, or if you wanted to have a more editorial or magazine type look, there's one of the tools which is called grainy film, which is where you can go in and apply a number of different presets to your photograph, and it gives it a more just like editorial feel, and it's great for like travel photography if you're doing that type of thing. So you can pick one of the presets, press the tick icon, and that's you done. Or you can go into this menu here where you can adjust the grain, and the grain is just the amount of those wee dots that you see in your photograph. It gives it a film type effect. Or the style strength is how much of the preset adjustment if you want to make it more or less. So you can see the grain again. You're not going to be, I don't understand why you want to use too much grain, because normally in photography you're trying to get a better quality photograph, but you can intensify the grainy effect if you wanted to. And there we go.